Now we will move on to award. So your proposal was accepted. The award comes in, and now we need to negotiate the award with really with the small business, but then sometimes also with the sponsor. So Emily, I know you're not listed here, but is there anything you don't have any specific tasks listed here, but is there anything you want to mention about award negotiation?
This is all us.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like I said earlier, sometimes these can be protracted negotiations, or sometimes they can be really fast. And the companies are sometimes good about telling us, hey, we got the award, we're waiting on it. And some are not, and they're doing all this negotiation. And then they come to us and they say, hey, I need this tomorrow. And that it can be quite challenging. And so it's important to have that relationship with them and to make sure that you're in the know as to what's happening so that we can start working on some things. Because when you submit a proposal, you don't know what the terms are going to be. Sometimes they look really friendly by the RFP, but then the award comes in, it has everything that you're like, oh my gosh, this was not supposed to be in this agreement. And companies can accept a lot of terms that we don't necessarily accept because they are for profit and we are not. And so it's important that we have a say in the negotiation and trying to carve out our world and make it match with what we need. And sometimes that can take a while, especially since we are not in the direct line with the sponsor and we're relying on the industry partner to relay our concerns and what the reasons for our concerns and to fight that battle for us. And that can sometimes be challenging just because they don't understand our world or they're not comfortable with it.
One great example of that is if you seek a Department of Defense or one of their affiliated agencies such as DARPA, SBIR, STTR project, it will almost certainly include national security restrictions that are problematic for us as an institution. We can accept them, but they require specific compliance planning, and they remove what we call the fundamental research waiver. And so what this waiver means is that it is in the US export control regulations. It says if research is performed at an academic institution in the United States and there are no national security restrictions on the project, primarily that you're free to assign foreign nationals to the project and you're free to publish the results of your work without requiring approval. Review is okay, but without requiring approval of a government sponsor, then it's deemed fundamental research. So the DoD likes to include publication approval, again, not review, but publication approval requirements, and they like to include citizenship requirements, and they like to include specific information security requirements in these SBIR, STTR contracts. They do that because the company can and should accept all of those things, maybe not necessarily the citizenship requirements, but they don't perform fundamental research because they're not an academic institution, and it behooves them to meet the DoD cybersecurity requirements. However, those three things can be hard for us as an academic institution with a high international graduate student population to meet. And so if those requirements show up in a contract and they are flown down to us as the subcontractor, then it's my team who works with you and then and Emily and negotiates with the contractor, the small business, to get a waiver from those requirements. Or if we can't get a waiver, then we work with you to develop a compliance plan, such as a technology control plan or a system security plan to manage our compliance with those obligations. We primarily where a lot of the discussion boils down to is the statement of work. What is it? What is the work that you're performing under this project? Is it consistent with the typical scientific and academic research that normally goes on in your lab that isn't subject to those kinds of national security restrictions? Or are you working with some kind of sensitive technology? Or are you receiving confidential military related data from the sponsor or from the contractor? Or are you developing some kind of physical item or software or item that has a specific purpose, and thus isn't scientific data or experimental data that you would normally publish in academic journals? So we help to walk through that process with you, and And sometimes, well, I shouldn't say sometimes. Most of the time, we're successful in arguing that what we're doing is fundamental research, but we cannot always make that argument. And so, if we do that, then as part of this process, we then implement those compliance plans. This would also be the stage where if there's other research compliance related obligations that are present in the performance of the project, such as you're dealing with human subjects or human subjects data, you have some kind of institutional bio or chemical safety concern that needs to be addressed through a protocol, or you're dealing with animals, this would be the time then to work with those offices, right, to implement the protocols that are necessary to meet our other institutional requirements. I think that's it in terms of award negotiation. This hopefully is a relatively short step in the process in terms of the time frame. Emily, did you have anything else you wanted to mention about negotiation?
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay. All right. So then hopefully the negotiation goes quickly and we can hop over into award performance. I'll start off with this one. So, right, I talked a lot about writing and getting approval for the different compliance protocols that you may need. Well, then step one, obligation one for them performing the award is making sure that you're aware of and following those protocols and communicating to the grad student or postdoc that is contributing to the project, that they're aware of what their obligations are for those different protocols, and that you're following those plans. Like I mentioned, this part of research security compliance, and this would be submitting, if it's applicable, submitting your publications, your journal articles to the sponsor, going through their publication approval process, making sure to get approval before you assign a foreign national to the project, again, if that requirement is on your project. I guess I'll mention, just for avoidance of doubt, NSF and NIH and NASA, they almost always, NASA may, but the rest of them, they do not put foreign national restrictions on projects. So if you want to avoid a foreign national issue with your, if you want to avoid having sponsor approval for foreign nationals on your project, I would say avoid Department of Defense, SBIR, STTRs. This would, performing this project would also then, if you are a co-founder, equity holder in the small business following your conflict of interest management plan, which that is reviewed and approved as part of the award acceptance, and then also making sure that if there are any incidents related to cybersecurity, research misconduct, other laboratory conduct issues, that you're reporting those incidents through the appropriate channel within the institution. And then just, if you do need to make personnel changes during the course of this project because of these compliance protocols or because of intellectual property reporting requirements, other grant reporting requirements, make sure that you're following your department as well as the research onboarding and offboarding process, and if the personnel change during the course of the project. Emily, from your side, what do researchers need to do for performing the award?
Well, you need to spend the money. You need to do the project. You need to, especially sometimes if the award negotiation took longer, then the actual contract period may have started before we have the award negotiated. And so if you've used another cost center for those funds, you need to make sure to move them onto the correct cost center. Whatever expenses were for that project should be on that project. And this can impact our invoicing. One of the problems that everybody is encountering right now is that the government won't send you money until you spend money. And they may not send you more money until you spend a certain percentage of money. And so this can really affect companies if they can't get their money from the government because we haven't spent at the burn rate that we were supposed to. So monitor your burn rate, make sure the expenses are posted to the correct cost center. Make sure that you are submitting your technical reports, the interim reports, so that the company can then submit it to the sponsor, because that's usually what generates a payment. Most of these are fixed price for the companies. When we get to the end of the project, I'll send you a reminder of that you need to, according to the contract, whatever agreement or whatever reports or technical reports, progress reports, any other type of reports are needed, I will send you a reminder that you need to send that to the company. Sometimes the sponsors will also request a final invention report, which that's why it's very important that you submit those invention disclosures to the Technology Commercialization Office, because that's the information we use to produce the report. But there's also property reports, like if you bought any equipment on the project, we have to disclose that and what the property is. Then those are the main reports, but it's just important that you keep up with your obligations. And these, like we said, the phase ones are a very short turnaround time. So it's important that you hit the ground running, you get going, you have everything ready, and that we have all of this in place, because sometimes the turnaround time is really fast and putting all these compliance things in place could take longer. So it's important that we do it at the beginning so that you can just start working on the project.
Right. Thank you, Emily. So that concludes us walking through this diagram. There is a question in the chat, and I think now we'll take any other. I'm going to try and zoom out. Let's see if I can make this work. We'll take any other questions that you have. I'll go ahead and address that question in the chat. So we have a web page, our guidelines for student participation in conflicts of interest, which Aretha is going to drop into the chat. So the answer is yes. Graduate students are welcome to found a company, to use university resources to give them guidance and expertise in terms of founding that company. Before they take that action, what we recommend is that they meet and discuss with technology commercialization the invention, the product or service they developed, to get guidance from OTC about whether that that intellectual property is owned by the university or not. And if it's owned by the university, then the university would help them in terms of patent protection, and then work with them to license the technology to this startup company, whenever it is formed. I am not an expert on that process. I would, that's why. And the student and a faculty member supervising them should meet and talk through that process with technology commercialization. If this startup company, if the intention is to do this before the student has graduated, then there are some potential COI issues. They are discussed. There are a couple different situations that are discussed in the COI guidelines for student participation in a conflict of interest. And in particular, if the faculty member is going to also be involved in the company, that could result in a mentoring or supervisory COI. So we recommend, if there is going to be, in particular, faculty participation in the startup, coming and talk to us. We can help kind of sort out those details about the timing, about how to be involved and how to manage the COI from the startup company participation. Okay. Is that another question? Do we have to work with OSB to be involved in an SBIR or STTR? The answer is no, but that participation would be considered an outside activity, and so you would need to submit an activity and interest report through my office in order to get approval for the outside activity. And so the two primary roles that you can serve in this situation would be, one, you are directly involved on the company side of an SBIR STTR project, where they pay you directly, where you're contributing directly to their performance of the federal contract. In that case, you can't use any university resources to perform your work, right? It is totally on your own. You're doing that as your individual expert as the company employee. So you have to use all company resources. And then also as part of going through the activity interest report process, we'll talk to you about, in particular, intellectual property. So this is a sticky issue when it comes to outside activities, in terms of the way UT System defines our intellectual property assignment and ownership rights as employees. If it overlaps with your scope of employment, UT System policy says you're supposed to assign ownership of that invention, of that intellectual property, to UT System. So make sure to be clear about what your what your scope of work is if you're going to be contributing to an SBIR, STTR outside the university, because it is a research and development project. And so from that angle, at least, of what kind of work are you doing, it does, overlap with the typical work that, a faculty member would perform at the university. I said there were two types of ways to contribute to these projects. So one is, you're involved, directly with the company. Another would be to serve as a consultant for the company. And so, you can be a consultant on a project either, directly, which is very similar to one, or you could be potentially a consultant to another university that has an SBIR, STTR project where they have a subcontract, and then they hire you as a consultant, like basically as a subcontractor. So again, also an outside activity, similar kinds of requirements and potential conflicts of interest that would arise as part of performing that project or performing that work for another a non-UTD SBIR STTR. Emily, did I cover all the issues that come up with those?
if they intend to be giving the money to UTD, yes, you can't submit on our behalf. You can. There's a difference between a letter of commitment and a letter of support. A letter of support is from faculty saying, hey, I'm really interested in this project. I am perfectly aligned for it. It's right up my expertise. I'm going to rock it and we're going to do amazing things. A letter of commitment is the university saying, yes, we agree that this faculty can do this project and we will help you administer it. We will accept the money through whatever contracting mechanism there is. And in order to get that letter, you have to go through OSP because I signed that letter. And I cannot sign that letter until you jump through all the hoops that we talked about earlier, a cert form, a budget, a scope of work, because we have to know that we can come to some sort of agreement once awarded. And so that's the difference between a letter of support and a letter of commitment. As a consultant or as just someone involved in the project, you could provide a letter of support on your own. That's fine. But once it comes to the university being involved, you need a letter of commitment. You need something signed by an authorized signatory, and that would be me. And so that would be our office. And it's for each one. I should state this. We've had a problem long ago where companies would reuse our letters for subsequent proposals without talking to us or letting us know that there's another proposal that we just sent in and we just changed the date on your letter. Nowadays we use Adobe signature, so it's not as easy to change the letter, but there needs to be a new letter each time, and we need a new proposal. We need a new documentation. Salaries change, graduate student rates change, our IDC rate may change. All of that will need to be updated for each individual proposal. I guess that's a point to make too, is that the budget will include IDC. It is at our negotiated rate. These are federal projects, so we have a federal rate and it will be at our negotiated rate in the budget.
Any other questions?
All right, if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and close. I do want to take a moment to share our final slide. If you will, go ahead and complete that survey for us. We would appreciate your feedback. And definitely want to thank you, Emily, for sharing your expertise and knowledge. And Connor, we thank you as well for bringing us this information as a part of the Research Security Series. We appreciate you both for pulling together this valuable information and always sharing the good stuff with us. Audience, we want to thank you for joining us as well. Stay abreast of upcoming Office of Research and Innovation programs by following us on social media and subscribing to our newsletter. Please join us on February 28th for the second installment in the Research Security Series titled Introduction to Controlled Unclassified Information. Try saying that fast 3 times. This information and the polite request to complete this survey about today's program can be found in the chat. We hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day.